Hey gang, it's Platt here, back with another Spirit Series video. In this video we're going to kind of continue on from our previous video where we just did a broad overview of Scotch. And in this video we're going to focus more on blended Scotch. Blended Scotch does not have the allure or glamour of single malt Scotch, but it's probably more important than single malt Scotch because blended Scotch makes up roughly 90% of the Scotch sold, so it's the workhorse of Scotch. Real quick, let's review the types of blended Scotches. We have blended single malts, or blended malt Scotch. Blended malt Scotch, which is a blend of two or more different single malt Scotches produced at different distilleries. A good example of this is Monkey Shoulder. Blended malts aren't real popular, but if you go to your liquor store, you'll probably find one, and it's probably the Monkey Shoulder. Next, we have blended single grain Scotch. It's not that the whiskey is from a single grain; it could have multiple grains in the grain bill, but that each whiskey comes from a singular distillery, and that those then get blended together, two or more of those. There are some very high quality versions of this whiskey. Some of it has gotten out on the market, but for the most part, this style of whiskey is used to help produce the last style, which is just blended Scotch. And blended Scotch is a blend of those single malt Scotches along with the single grain whiskeys. Roughly in a blended Scotch, roughly 60 to 85% of that whiskey is from those grain whiskeys or grain Scotch, however you want to refer to it. Blended Scotch is known for the big brands, unlike single malts, which again we'll get into in the next video. Is more kind of romanticized for the boutique distillery in a little village. Blended Scotches are the big brands, your Chevis, your Dewar's, J&B, Cutty Sark, etc. And where those big brands came about and who we have to thank for blended Scotch is not the distilleries, but it's actually the grocers of a couple hundred years ago. Back in the early to mid 1800s, the way you would purchase Scotch in Scotland and even in England was you go to your local grocer. And he would go and buy maybe a barrel of Scotch from Macallan, maybe one from Oban, maybe one from Glenlivet. And he would keep it at the store, maybe let it age a little bit longer, what have you. And you would go buy, and if you wanted some Scotch, you would go buy, and he would bottle it for you. Modern day bottling and packaging just wasn't available back then, so that was how it was done. Well, the grocers were starting to get a little feedback from their customers, and one of the things they're stating is a lot of these Scotch whiskeys were kind of harsh. The Scotch producers at the time were kind of like their Irish brethren. They made a big, bold, pot-stilled whiskey. People were wanting something a little different, and what the grocers would sometimes do is, let's say they had a barrel of like a Lefroy, something really peaty. And some people say, well, that's just a little too much. They may say, well, I got some Glencanischi over there. It's a little lighter. Let me throw a little of that in you, see if you like it. And so the grocers kind of took it on their part to blend some of these single malts to create something, again, palatable for their customers. It was not something widespread or known at the time. It was just more of a customer service thing at the time. Also in the early to mid 1800s, we had the creation of the column and the coffee stills. As we've talked about in other videos, these produce a lighter whiskey, more approachable whiskey. And again, palates were starting to change at the time, and people were wanting these lighter whiskeys. Fortunately for the grocers, in 1860, it became legal for them, or anybody else for that matter, to come along and blend these traditional single malts with the new lighter grain whiskeys, and so the age of the blended Scotch was born. Again, at the time, it was something done at the grocer's level. Nothing was perfected, but along came a man named Andrew Usher II. If you look around your liquor stores in the Scotch section, you will find Usher blended Scotch, and that is from that family's lineage. But Andrew II was the first to really take blending Scotch to an art level. His father was a brewer, and he played around with blending the Scotch, but more like, well, I'll take something peaty and I'll take something a little lighter and just throw it together. Andrew II started again kind of turning into an art and also into a science. So much so that some people think he might be the father of modern Scotch. In a blend that we would see today, you might get as many as 40 to 50 whiskeys in there. They're very complex. Again, this is not just taking something smoky and then something with a little more honey in it and just, all right, we're done. And this is where blended Scotches really kind of stick out from single malt, in the sense that single malt Scotches are about that distiller and also that barrel that they put them in. Are we just using a regular oak, or are we using sherry, port, what have you? Where with blended Scotch, it's about that master blender. It's about his palate, his ability to create a consistent product, and again, realizing taking all those different whiskeys and creating a certain taste profile. And that skill that really, again, sticks out with the blended Scotches. Some of the blended Scotch makers, besides buying Scotch from other people, actually do have a distillery themselves and produce their own. Chevis has a distillery, and they produce a single malt that they will then add into their blend, kind of make it something more proprietary. The particular whiskey, or blended Scotch whiskey we're going to try today, is Johnnie Walker Red Label Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume, 80 proof. It was Johnnie Walker's grandsons, George and Alexander, that came up with the idea of the colored label, or almost color-coded. At the time, around the turn of the century, they had three different colors. There was red, black, and white. White ended up kind of going away, but now we've got blue, gold, green, etc. So let's give her a try. All right. I pick up some vanilla, maybe leaning toward toffee, but not a lot. A little bit of the smoke. Let's give it a try. Definitely get a little, got more of a punch on the front of the tongue, that sweet punch, than I did with the doors from the previous video. The smoke came a little bit later, but it's there. A little bit of the peat. Body, to me, just shade more body than that doors. I'm going to say a little more aggressive than the Doers we had last week. Very similar styles, though. I'm going to say, yeah, probably just a shade more smoke too. I think compared to the Doers of the previous video, a little bigger Scotch. Just turn up the smoke and the viscosity a little bit. Nice Scotch. This right here is probably what you would think of Scotch. This is probably what you would, if you drink this, you're like, all right, this is probably what the old timer always see at the end of the bar, drinking water. This is a classic example of a blended Scotch. I want to say that. Smoky, a little bit of sweetness, a hint of those kind of vanilla, toffee, some of the wood notes, even though it's not oaky or anything like that. But overall, nice blend. Like I said, a good representation of what this style is all about. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.